There's a world of difference between keeping alive someone who would otherwise be dead and killing someone who would otherwise be alive. So many people who support euthanasia think of it as turning off life support machines. But we already have that right, and the right to express our views while alive and well about how much medical intervention we want when our lives near their end. Euthanasia is not that. It is a lot more than dying with dignity, as its proponents claim, and it will radically change the way policymakers treat the old, the vulnerable and the sick, which I'll explain in a moment. But tonight, as Australia's first assisted dying laws come into force in Victoria, whatever your views on the issue, we should all be better informed about what these laws mean, because death is the inescapable universal reality for all of us. And I feel many of us have glossed over this debate because death is a difficult subject in these anti-religious times. Now, in legal terms, euthanasia is giving people a lethal dose of drugs, either a lethal injection from a doctor, in the case of the Northern Territory's laws that were overturned 2 decades back, or a lethal cocktail of drugs that people get on a prescription from their chemist and then take at home. And that's the case of Victoria's new laws from today. Now, in Victoria, people with less than a year to live whose suffering is deemed intolerable and who make 3 requests to die can be given lethal drugs if 2 doctors approve. If you read or heard the various headlines announcing this change today, most trumpet the 68 safeguards that are meant to protect us and our most vulnerable from wrongful death. Let's take a closer look, because these are not the safeguards that euthanasia activists claim them to be. The requirement for a 2-doctor approval doesn't mean 2 doctors you know or 2 doctors who have treated you for some time. It doesn't mean your oncologist in the case of terminal cancer. It's any 2 GPs who can sign off on your bid to die under these new laws, whether they've treated you before or not. With soaring mental health issues in Australia, nor is there any requirement in Victoria for you to be assessed by a psychiatrist. Perhaps most importantly of all, there's also no requirement before you take your prescribed drugs and end your life at home for you to be given information about options for palliative care and what can already be done lawfully to ease the very understandable human fears we all have about a death that might involve suffering or pain. Now, I've seen advanced palliative care firsthand with 2 people very close to me. And here's the difference. Where advanced palliative care is about killing the pain, euthanasia is about killing the patient. Now, some of you tonight watching this program will argue that's fair enough. That's what we want in Australia today. Indeed, part of the pitch for these laws is that they're progressive, that they're a measure of a humane society, and that we should be able to help people who want to die, who no longer want to live. But as a society, aren't we supposed to be against suicide? Don't we regard the rate of suicide among young Aboriginal people or former military personnel as a national disgrace? Quite apart from the problem of turning doctors from people who enhance life into people who might want to end it, which is why the AMA remains very concerned about these laws, surely there's a double standard here, some jarring mixed messages. I mean, how can we tell our young people that they have everything to live for at the same time as we tell our older people and sick people facing the end that they might as well shuffle off now? Now, as you know, I've worked on government policy for almost 2 decades. It won't be long before the finance hardheads reject putting new drugs on the PBS that merely extend life rather than save life, arguing instead that euthanasia is a better cost-saving measure. What about people who are old, particularly women, who we know have much less superannuation than men? What about when our aged Australians run out of money? They live longer than they had perhaps planned. How will they deal with the pressure of a medicated death from family and others when they can no longer afford to live? What about the severely depressed? Take the example of the Netherlands. Since legalising euthanasia in 2002, the range of conditions eligible in the Netherlands has been expanded, and the definition of unbearable suffering has been relaxed. Patients with mental health issues have been reportedly subject to euthanasia, and the number of people medically put down in that country has skyrocketed from under 2,000 in the beginning to well over 6,000 a year now. I accept that some people at some times think that they would rather be dead. And I know the unutterable grief that suicide brings to people's families, and I can understand the argument that a planned death is less traumatic. No one in this debate wants to see anyone in pain. But this is an argument, in my view, for better access to palliative care, not for making suicide a treatment option. Because there's a world of difference between reliving or relieving someone's pain and ending someone's life. Pain relief is what's humane, not euthanasia. And because I've always believed one of the principal duties of law is to protect society's most vulnerable, I can't support any law being used to sanction the deliberate killing of a human being or its encouragement. Deep down, modern society is in revolt against the reality that life is often hard. There's disappointment, there's failure, there's anxiety, there's sickness, and there's death. Every life has its share. Some lives, some families, of course, more than others. But how we deal with this should be the making of us as human beings, not the breaking of us.